Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Arseblog. James, good morning to you.
Morning, Andrew. How's it going?
It is going okay. Bank holiday weekend here, of course.
Of course.
Not that it makes any fucking difference to me, really. I don't get a day off.
We pod on.
We pod on, yes. We always pod. Apart from maybe next week when we might be slightly light on the pod front due to a bit of holidays. But we'll explain that next week. That's fine.
Okay. And it's quite... I mean, the season's over, isn't it?
Yeah, well done.
I quite like these podcasts because I'm sort of like, you know, we don't have a game to break down. It's just 90 minutes of... whatever we want.
Correct.
Arsenal, we set the agenda now.
Yes, exactly. Rather than being dictated to by football matches, it's entirely down to us. Yes, it will be a summer of Arsenal-adjacent conversation. I think that's the best way of putting it.
Because, for 8-9 months of the year, we spend the first half of the show, laboriously talking about a match, and then only get to talk about transfers in the second half of the show.
Yeah, it's not good enough.
This time, it's going to be wall-to-wall transfers, which, let's be honest, is what everyone wants.
That's exactly it. Nobody loses their mind during the summer. Everybody stays calm and sane and rational with their opinions. It's the most wonderful time of the year, is it not?
It is. I did spot a couple of questions along the lines of why haven't we signed anyone yet on the 2nd of June. So nice to see everyone's pretty chilled out about the whole thing.
To be fair, I suspect those were a bit tongue-in-cheek, But of course we are in, right now, transfer window 1.
Of course.
So there's 2 transfer windows. This is transfer window 1, and then... it closes for a little bit, and then it opens again for transfer window 2.
They've copied the format of the pod, Andrew.
The retransferring, yeah.
2 parts with a little break in between. They saw what we were doing, and they thought, that's genius.
Well, it's a winning formula. What can I say?
What can I say? I mean, it's all to serve the Club World Cup, which I have to confess, I've got no idea what that's about. Like, I know, I couldn't tell you... I know who's in the Club World Cup, but only because of who's trying to buy players. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, what we know about the Club World Cup is that it is a complete abomination, a travesty of a tournament that does not need to exist, that only exists to fuel the ego of Gianni Infantino, who has incredible main character syndrome, and this tournament is completely unnecessary. Nobody needs it. Nobody wants it. You know the way there's been discussions about, World Cups in the recent past, and people go, well, you could just, if you're that objective, you could just not watch. And you're sort of like, yeah, I know that, yeah, that's an option. But it is the World Cup. I've grown up with the World Cup my entire life. There isn't I'm not going to watch the Club World Cup at all. Like, I do not need football right now. I need a break from football. I don't need to watch Man City playing Flamengo, playing Chelsea, playing some other... Nobody needs it. It's just...
It's massive. There's so many people in it. I didn't really realise. 4, 8, 12, 16, 32 teams, Andrew.
There's no point to this. Other than it being like an ego trip, a sort of thing that he can just appear at, like a grotesque, weird, creepy skeleton man that he is, so he can be on TV with his fucking sprinkly salt meat wanker mate and hand out medals, and all the players would be like, great, well, I mean, what the fuck is this?
It's good to see Salt Bay's involved, isn't it? That's a sign that everything's going
above board. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I do you remember when the Club World Cup, and maybe I'm making this up, maybe time and age are getting the better of me, but I remember it when it was basically a game, and then it was like there were 4 teams, I think, involved, 2 semi-finals and a final, and now it's massive. Deary me.
And nobody even wanted to buy the rights, the TV rights. There wasn't a single broadcasting organization in the entire world that was prepared to pay for the TV rights. But all of a sudden there was a little, little howdy-doody in the background there, and they're on some channel. And
what's it on in the UK?
I couldn't tell you.
Let's have a look. DAZN.
Right.
DAZN.
I don't have DAZN.
No, I've had it occasionally. Do you know what I mean? I've sort of subbed for a month to watch a boxing match or something, but I don't think I'll be reinstating it for the Club World Cup. I mean, so English teams involved: Man City. That's it, is it? Chelsea.
Yeah.
So to clarify, why are Chelsea in it? Because they won that thing the other day, or were they already in it?
I think Todd Bowley paid for them to be in it. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe it's to do with their UEFA coefficient or something. I don't know.
Not sure.
Yeah, so basically the TV rights are on DAZN because there was some deal with Saudi Arabia, who paid $1 billion to take a stake in the company, and now they're going to show the Club World Cup.
Wow. Okay, so Chelsea are in the Club World Cup thanks to their triumph in the 2021 UEFA Champions League.
Right. So it's all Kai Havertz's fault then, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it is Kai Havertz's fault. I know that you're determined not to watch it, Andrew.
I won't. I shan't.
What if I tell you this?
You can't.
Olivier Giroud is in the Club World Cup with LAFC.
You know what? I'm fond of Olivier Giroud.
Yeah.
But I don't need any more Olivier Giroud in my life than I already have.
Okay.
I'm satisfied with the levels of Giroud that I have in my current existence. And that's not tempting for me at all. I guess it's because who's he playing for? LA Galaxy now, is it?
Yeah. No, I think it's LAFC. I think that's a different team.
Sorry to any Galaxy fans out there.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah, sorry guys. LAFC. But what has happened relevant to the Club World Cup? Has Jorginho gone now?
Well, he did a message.
He did a
message saying thank you with a few more words. So I assume he is gone, but it's not been officially announced by Arsenal because the contract would have run until June 30th. So I assume, much like the way Real Madrid have paid £10 million to have Trent Alexander-Arnold for 3 games or 4 games that nobody cares about, by the way. I presume Flamengo have paid us a considerable amount of money to let them have Jorginho early, because he too, like Trent Alexander-Arnold, would have been eligible to leave for free on June the 30th. But if you want to play in the abomination, the travesty that is the Club World Cup, you've got to put your money down. So how much do you reckon we got for Jorginho? Couple of million? 7 million? 12? No, no million?
Reports. I don't know if it's agreed as yet, but I know the clubs were talking about it. I saw reports coming out of Brazil that maybe something like 800,000, something like that. Basically, the value of what was remaining in his contract.
Right. Well, that's okay then.
Yeah. I mean, Arsenal shouldn't lose any money over this, right? It would be sort of crazy. Like Flamengo or Jorginho will have to buy him out effectively.
Yeah.
But yeah, I assume that will happen because I don't see Arsenal digging their heels in too much to prohibit him playing in such a prestigious competition. I mean, maybe we're a bit tone deaf here, Andrew. Maybe around the rest of the world, they're like building this Club World Cup as an actual thing. I don't know.
Maybe. I still don't trust anything that is put into the world by Gianni Infantino. I'm sorry.
What if we were in it?
I mean, if we were in it, it would be because we've won the Champions League. But I think we should take a moral stance if we win the Champions League and tell Gianni Infantino to go fuck himself. That's what I would like.
I would like that too. It doesn't feel very Arsenal in 2025, but...
No, I agree with you there. I agree with you.
I would like it.
I would like that.
Let that be on record.
Yeah, just
aggregate that.
A big Instagram post just saying "fuck off."
Yeah.
But look, if the consequence of winning the Champions League was entry into this ridiculous tournament that nobody cares about, I guess you could live with it. But that would mean a much more elongated season for Arsenal. Like, it can't be good, and I'm not saying I'm in any way opposed to this, by the way, but it can't be good for Manchester City and Chelsea to have their season extended to that extent, you know? Like, there's got to be some physical consequences to that. That might be apparent next season. Maybe they start next season brilliantly because they're still, you know, full of momentum or whatever. Or maybe they get a load of injuries because their players haven't been allowed to have any rest or proper holidays.
Yeah, I mean, the first group stage game is on June the 15th. Kicks off with Al Ahly against Inter Miami.
The fixture everybody's been waiting for.
Yeah, the showpiece occasion. And then the final is the 13th of July. So it's a full month. It is. I mean, it's effectively, it's comparable to competing in an international tournament.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess selfishly, that's great for us, isn't it? If those players are tied up there.
Yes. I mean, you're looking for every advantage you can get, and if part of the advantage is a disadvantage to teams who are going to be competitive with you next season in the Premier League, then you take it. But it is
weird, this thing of players turning up in time to pay. I mean, I'd love to see Chelsea qualified through their 2021 Champions League victory. I'd love to see a sort of starting 11 comparison between that team and what they end up fielding in their opening game against Lyon, because
wow, there can't be many players.
I suspect maybe even none. Maybe a Reece James or somebody like that, but it'd be a totally different team.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's quite a weird dynamic to the whole thing. And they're trying to get, I think, Delap in time to take part. We spoke about Trent Alexander-Arnold going to Real Madrid. I don't know if they'll do Dean Hyson in time as well, potentially. So yeah, that's also quite odd, isn't it? It's like you'll feel these are where players are going to sort of be seen for the first time in this World Cup setting.
Olivier Giroud was in the squad for the 2021 Champions League final.
Maybe that's why he's qualified for the Club World Cup.
That could be it. I mean, there's basically only Reece James still at Chelsea.
Yeah.
Or maybe, does Billy Gilmore still play for Chelsea? Does anyone know?
No, he plays for Napoli.
What?
He's part of Napoli's predominantly Scottish Serie A winning midfield. Am I right about that? I think I am.
Right.
It feels fake, doesn't it? Now I've started saying it out loud. Yeah, he does. He plays for Napoli alongside Scott McTominay, and they've won Serie A.
Sometimes football just kind of messes with your head, doesn't it? It's just like, what?
The McTominay stuff's mad. I don't know how much you followed it, but like he's sort of the biggest star in Italian football right now.
Crazy.
He sort of led Napoli to the title with 12 goals from midfield.
What does that say to you about Serie A?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a similar thing to 38-year-old Henrik Mkhitaryan still playing as a sort of holding midfield player in Serie A. And maybe a similar thing to the Champions League final, which we should talk about.
We should talk about that, yeah. I did look at that lineup and think it's literally insane that they're playing Henrik Mkhitaryan against that PSG midfield.
Sure.
Like, not to pin it all on Henrik Mkhitaryan, of course, but talk about one-sided. talk about one-sided. Jesus.
That the biggest victory, I think, ever, isn't it? Biggest
victory ever.
Margin in a European final.
Yeah. European Cup final, anyway. Maybe in the UEFA as well. I don't know. Previous incarnations of the UEFA Cup and Cup Winners' Cup and all of that.
Not sure. Certainly in the Champions League or equivalent.
Because they kept going on about the AC Milan win over Barcelona, wasn't it? They beat Barcelona in the '94 European Cup final, Champions League final. 4-0.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, it was pretty impressive stuff. A victory for football, as Rio Ferdinand called it in commentary.
I mean, where do I even start with this? I did notice his, like, after many years at TNT Sports, it's time for me to say goodbye to all of you. It's like, yeah, you don't have to say goodbye, just fuck off and stop talking.
Yeah.
But anyway, a victory for football. On the one hand, you could say you kind of know what he means because of the way PSG play the game.
Yes.
On the other hand, though, there is the whole, like, how are PSG able to play the game this way? It's such an interesting thing to consider because, and I think I said this to you the other night, watching PSG, you know, you can't help but have a little bit of like, oh, I wish we could be a bit more like that.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, very specifically in terms of style of play and the way that they play the game. They're so exciting. It's a young team, loads of talent, and they're exciting to watch and they're fun to watch. And I think we said this after the PSG semi-finals, you know, by some distance for me anyway, the best team that we've played this season. And that includes Liverpool, you know, who ran away with the Premier League in the end. But it's sort of impossible to separate that from what the club has become under the ownership, owned by a country, owned by a nation, and the kind of money that they have thrown around over the last 15 years. You're looking at billions and billions of euros on transfer fees and wages, you know? Yeah. So it's a difficult one. You know, they are a great team to watch. They are really exciting. They do have lots of great players and fun players. And then the money thing is sort of at the heart of it. You can't uncouple those two things, really, can you?
No, and I think it was a bit disappointing in the commentary, and I don't literally just mean the in-game commentary, but I mean sort of the coverage around the final. I don't think necessarily that sort of balance was achieved.
Plucky little underdogs PSG.
Yeah. But I also will join you in admitting I really like watching that team. I mean, how can you not? They were fantastic. You know, there are some sort of positive stories within the group. I really like Luis Enrique. I think that his personal story is obviously incredibly moving.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to not, you know, feel sort of attached to that in some way. I think they play great football. You know, there's a host of players there who I just love watching. But at the same time, you sort of can't really say that without acknowledging the full picture. And it's now, you know, back-to-back years, isn't it? I think is it Man City and PSG back-to-back. So nation-state owned clubs.
Yeah.
Winning consecutive Champions Leagues. I fear we may have to get used to it.
I mean, it is, again, when you have this discussion, you're always conscious of the fact that, you know, we're talking about this as fans of a club that is owned by a billionaire, a US billionaire, you know, and there are things about, I'm sure this is true for all football fans. I guess there are things about every football club that make you hold your nose and look the other way a little bit, you know. That's sort of the cognitive dissonance that we have to exist with in the world that we live in, the society that we live in.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest and say that I'm almost, and I think this is probably doesn't exhibit sort of the most kind of moral courage on my part, but I think that I'm so kind of worn down by it. Like, I think I'm close to a tipping point where it's like, I can't start taking stands against X or Y because the weight of things is so great. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I can't see the wood for the trees almost in terms of this. Like, I'm so heavily compromised ethically that it becomes difficult to have a sort of clear position anymore. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just like...
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on in football, in the Premier League, with lots of clubs and with Arsenal and across Europe. There are things that are difficult to deal with and difficult to try and get your head around. The victory for football thing, though, it is, I guess, a commentary on playing style and how the game is played. And there is, I suppose, a sense at this moment in time, and maybe it's sort of relevant to us in a way, in that the game has become quite, how would you put it? Not robotic, but, it is coached, or players are coached to within an inch of their lives, right? The patterns of play. Is there the freedom of expression that brings you the most joy from football? Where you see a really brilliant player being allowed to do what he does best. Maybe there's a very good example of that this season, in that Mo Salah was that guy for Liverpool, and spoke afterwards when he spoke to Arne Slot. I'm sure I've seen these quotes doing the rounds. Basically, he said, don't ask too much of me defensively and I will give you a lot at the other end of the pitch. And he sort of gave him that leeway and gave him that freedom, and boy, did it pay off for Liverpool. Yeah. So it's that balance between, right, you want everybody to work together. You want that collective team environment, right? So everybody is doing their job. You're helping your teammate, but maybe to give yourself that little bit of an advantage, you need to maybe lean into some players' strengths a little bit more and let them off the leash a bit. Is that the way of putting it?
Yeah, I think so. And PSG are a side that, are based on the same kind of positional principles that dominate the top level of the game. I mean, Enrique is a Barcelona guy, a La Masia guy. He's from that school effectively. But when you think about the Champions League final, what you remember is the moments of individualism. Dembele's back heel, or do a step over or a nutmeg, and they are the moments that really get you off your seat. And to give them some credit, they seem to have struck that balance well, right, between structure and principles and individual flair.
Did you see the clip of Enrique was doing the rounds? A clip of Luis Enrique talking to Kylian Mbappe.
No, I've not
last
seen that.
season. So basically, he's sort of saying to Mbappe, "Look, if you can't deliver for us from an attacking perspective, right, and there are going to be games where you come up against quality opposition and, you're not going to be able to score the goals, you can still work for the team by closing down." I think he was talking about a goalkeeper and a defender. I can't remember the team he was specifically.
Is this in like a team talk setting? Or?
Yeah, it was a weird sort of like they're sitting in front of a
documentary
documentary type thing, I guess. Right. And you're talking about Kylian Mbappe here. Probably a great example of the player that you would say, okay, we don't need you to do a lot of defensive work. We'll get you the ball. You go and do what you can do from an attacking perspective. But Enrique was very strong on, even if, out of possession, what he wanted from Kylian Mbappe.
Right.
But I think that's interesting in that we're also looking at a PSG team, or looked at a PSG team on Saturday, who did seem to have that freedom. But at the same time, someone like Ousmane Dembele, the way that he worked on Saturday night on the pitch was incredible. So that there is that combination of hard work, but you're also still allowing those flair players, your Kvaratskhelia or whatever it might be, to be able to do what they do. So I think that balance is certainly an interesting thing to consider. You know, I do hope, there's part of me hopes that Mikel Arteta was looking at that game on Saturday night, as I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was sitting down to watch it and thinking, okay, that's quite a good way to go about things. Whether that's in his thinking or outside of his comfort zone, I don't know. But I did think that. I did hope that a little bit, you know.
Can I ask, and not with a sort of view to a realistic transfer or anything like that, was there a particular player that you admired or enjoyed from that PSG team?
This season or just based on the final?
Either, really. I just think there's so many, like for me, there are probably half a dozen.
Yeah. I mean, really, listen, Kvaratskhelia is just such an incredible talent. And this, you know, the transfer fee, I think it was around 70 million, 80 million, which puts him within the reach of a lot of clubs in Europe. But maybe one of the ways that a club like PSG can exert its power is what they can offer behind the scenes, you know, in terms of wages and signing on fees, which make a deal like that basically impossible to do. But you couldn't look at him in the games that we played and in that game on Saturday night and not think, oh my God, what an addition he would be to Arsenal if you played him from the left-hand side. Yeah. But I will say the player who I really liked over the course of the two games that we played against him, and even the other night, even if he was a bit more low-key, was Vitinha.
Yeah. I think I agree, actually. Like, obviously, they've got brilliant attackers. Kvaratskhelia, I can't say that name, but I had a go. Doué is great to watch. Dembele is amazing, and I think this sort of reinvention of him as the kind of, you know, central pivotal figure in the attack is fascinating. But yeah, Vitinha, I mean, I would sort of liken him almost to the kind of presence that Santi Cazorla had when he played central midfield for us, where he just controls things and makes things happen, sets tempo. His use of the ball is so good; it kind of overcomes probably his athletic and physical capacity, which maybe isn't the best in European football, but technically and mentally so good. And he makes that team tick. And I really, 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 really loved watching him. I think he was probably my favourite player across the tournament, I would say.
Yeah, I think he's great. I think he's just a really good example of how technical quality, when it's at the highest level, is, I won't say superior to, but can come out on top of physical power. You know, you think of a 5'8" Portuguese skinny kind of guy. Can he really control midfield? Yes. He can. He's just so good. And this is a guy, you know, who was at Wolves. PSG bought him from Wolves.
Yeah, he was on loan at Wolves. I think he went back to Porto.
Right.
So Wolves had an option, a €20 million option on him, which they did not take up.
Idiots.
So, yeah. Remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't really figure very much. He was not a regular at Wolves. I mean, maybe, again, that says something about different leagues. You know, maybe, I don't know, watching him, I have to think that he could thrive in the Premier League.
Well, sure, yeah. But maybe it's a case that he was a good few years younger, and in the Premier League, maybe there is this idea that physicality is the first thing you should look at.
I think it's different as well when you're at Wolves. You know, I think when you're at a team who probably aren't going to dominate possession, I think the demands are different, aren't they?
Sure. I'd say when you're playing with Fabian Ruiz and João Neves, he was probably at Wolves as well, was he?
Yeah. They've all been at Wolves.
Everyone has been at Wolves.
Well, it's a similar sort of cabal of agents moving those players around, to be honest. So I don't think that's would be coincidence, but there you go. I think, you know, I'm not saying playing for Man City is easier per se, but it would have suited him more, for example, than playing for a Wolves.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the Champions League final.
Yeah. It lasted about 5 minutes, really. As soon as PSG got in front, there was only one outcome.
Did you, I mean, I have to say, again, stressing that I think PSG were the best team we played this season, and probably...
Andrew, Arsenal were the best team in this season's Champions League. Everyone knows that.
Okay, leaving that to one side, though, just for a moment. I did have a little pang of regret. I think PSG, over the course of the two legs, probably deserved to go through, right?
Well, did it not make you think we did pretty well?
It did make me think we did pretty well. And also I had regrets over the first 10, 15 minutes of the second leg, where, if we score one of those chances, I think it becomes a different game and a different dynamic. And I know margins are very tight in football, at top level football, and PSG were the right side of those margins, whether you think they were better, whether you think they had a bit of luck on their side. We didn't have a bit of luck on their side. They had a goalkeeper who produced fucking how many incredible saves over the two legs. But I did look at that game on Saturday night and think, we could have played Raheem Sterling and a bedside lamp up front and probably won the Champions League.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got no idea how good Inter are, to be honest. I've got no idea. I mean, I loved their game against Barcelona, and, I think that's a decent Barcelona side, and they came through, but they didn't turn up at all for the final. So, yeah, you would have fancied our chances against that Inter, that's for sure.
They couldn't even beat Scott McTominay to the Serie A title. That's how good they are.
And Billy Gilmour. But I think, I like it when the team that's impressed me most in a competition wins it. I mean, obviously, I prefer Arsenal win it. But if Arsenal aren't going to win it, for all the sort of ethical questions and concerns, I think PSG were probably the right winners this year in the Champions League. And I also take some crumb of comfort from the idea of, if you're going to go out, I think you want to go out to the winners. You know what I mean? It's I find that sort of mildly comforting. It's we didn't go out against a team that we should have beat.
Sure, okay. I get where you're coming from there.
We didn't blow it, I don't think.
That's fair enough.
Or bottle it, as I'm sure Rio Ferdinand would be, the BT commentators and the lads on the overlap would be queuing up to say.
Yeah. Well, there won't be much more of Rio Ferdinand on TV anymore.
Well, so unfortunately, Andrew, the internet still exists, so I don't think we'll be rid of him.
Yeah, but you can choose not to look at his stuff. Whereas if you're trying to watch a game and he's part of the commentary
screaming
team,
the words Ballon d'Or in the background throughout. Yeah, we will miss that.
Yeah, such keen insight. But there you go. So look, transfer stuff. I mean, I feel like, given that we're 33 minutes in, we should probably hold off on the old striker chat, because there is a bit of striker chat.
It's good to have some podcasts where we don't just talk about that for 90 minutes, I guess.
So we've probably got some questions about that, which we can save for part 2. But there is... there are other bits and pieces doing the rounds. We reckon that the old Zubamendi thing is going to go through. Reporting last week that he was set for a medical. Quite when this medical was going to take place, I'm not sure, because he's away with Spain or on duty with Spain. They've got Nations League, James.
Of course, all the big competitions.
The Nations.
This is when the season hits fever pitch, when the Nations League.
Yeah.
What is the Nations League, as we discussed the other week, and the Club World Cup spring into action. Yeah, it's internationals this week, I think.
Some this weekend, later this week, and over the weekend, and early next week. I think they're World Cup qualifiers or whatever. Do you have any inside info as to when that medical might take place? Is this going to happen in transfer window 1? Or will it be when the window reopens for transfer window 2?
My honest answer is don't know. Don't massively care. It's going to happen. He's going to have a medical, and barring an administrative error or something unexpected in that medical exam, he's going to be an Arsenal player. It doesn't matter to me enormously if it's on the 10th of June or the 1st of July.
Sure.
It's going to happen. In fact, it's on my list of things to do to try and find out exactly when that is going to take place. But I have to be honest and say, although professionally I have an interest in it, personally, I don't massively care.
I understand. I understand. I was only just seeing if you had a little, bit of insight for the listeners, but that's fine. I think everybody's, relatively calm about this one going through. And listen, I like him. I think he's a good player, and I think what he will bring to this Arsenal team is quite interesting to consider. But I don't think it's one of those where everybody's going to be like dancing in the streets when Martin Zubimendi signs, right?
No,
and not being unfair to the guy. It's just not a dancing in the streets kind of signing.
And I would say blame the reporters. Like, if we didn't know and it was announced right now, Zubimendi's having a medical, he's going to be an Arsenal player, the reaction would be very different to the current situation where people have had 6 months to kind of, no one wants to know what their Christmas present's going to be in June. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. So it's, it's your profession that is at fault.
Yeah, we're
football reporters.
Football reporters.
Just stop, guys. What are you doing? Nobody wants to hear any news about anything.
Let them have a surprise.
Let everything be a surprise.
That's what the Arsenal media team say to me regularly. Just let it be a surprise, James.
No, I'm going to ruin it for everyone
I'm going to ruin Christmas. I am the transfer window Grinch. Some people, it's interesting actually. I do get a lot of. Occasionally, I sort of see some of the reaction to things I write online, and people get really annoyed when they don't like what you've said. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Like, if you say, if I say on this podcast now, Arsenal aren't going to buy Gyokeres and Sesko, okay? It's not going to happen, right? Now, that will get aggregated. There'll be some tweet from some account being like, @Gunnerblog says it's not going to happen. And then I'll get a load of tweets being like, what is your problem, mate? Why do you have to ruin it for everyone? And it's really funny.
Yes.
Because it's like,
It seems very clear to most people, I would say, that Arsenal are not going to sign Sesko and
Well, why not? Are they not a big club?
Show some ambition.
This is what they'll say on the social media.
No, listen.
If they had any ambition, if Arsenal had any ambition, they'd buy every available striker and keep them in some sort of warehouse just so the other teams couldn't get them. If Stan Kroenke gave one single shit about this club, he would recruit every centre forward in world football.
It's a compelling argument. It is. I mean,
you can't argue with that, can you? If he gave a fig, he cared one little figgy about this club, he'd sign every striker that there is, and then he'd have them executed just so they could never play for another team. And if he doesn't do that, let me tell you, I will be tweeting about it. I'll be tweeting about it a lot.
Like we said, it's the most wonderful time of the year.
Aggregate that.
Listen, we want to just make it clear to anybody who is a fan of figs, that we're not belittling the fig industry.
Listen,
big Figma,
figs. Figs have, we respect figs.
Figs have feelings too.
They're weird, figs, but we respect them. Anyway, I can't remember what we were talking about. Transfers, was it?
Transfers, yeah. We were talking about
Zubimendi. When's he going to arrive? I don't know, June or July. Ask me tomorrow.
All right, I'll ask you tomorrow. The other sort of story, I was looking around this morning, right, that they're sort of going big in Barcelona about Joan Garcia going from Espanyol to Barcelona.
That's a big story,
It is a big story, yeah.
He's like an Espanyol boy. They love him.
Let me read this to you because I saw it on the Arses today. I want to give credit to the person who wrote this. So 1 second, if I can find the right guy. Here we go. Anyway, it's Matt C on the Arses, and he said, I had to check last night, and the last time Espanyol sold a player to Barcelona, George Graham was our manager. Espanyol's main reason for existing is not to be a feeder club for Barcelona. I'm not sure that's the main reason. They didn't just set themselves up so they could not sell players to Barcelona. But it is a rivalry. It's certainly a city rivalry because it's obscured a little bit by Barcelona-Real Madrid, right, in Spain. But Barcelona-Espanyol, it can be a bit testy, right? So there isn't a great history of players moving from Espanyol to Barcelona. There have been players who have played for both clubs, but very often there's like a club in the middle, right?
Yeah. It's not the done thing.
It's not really the done thing. But what was that noise?
I was just going to say, and...
Did you have a fig caught in your throat?
Yeah. What it was that... and the reporting about a week ago was like, Joan Garcia does not want to move to Barcelona. He is an Espanyol diehard. And that will not happen. So the latest developments, which I'm sure you're about to share with us, have been a particularly painful twist of the knife.
Well, the latest development, as far as I can see, is that deal is going to go through. However, the Espanyol manager said, maybe he's already sold, but the club hasn't told me anything. Personally, I highly doubt he'll sign for Barcelona. I'm not saying I cut off one of my hands to guarantee it, but nearly. Now, does that man need a saw and some gauze?
Wow. I mean, I don't know. So actually, here is a little bit of information. The latest that I heard on that last night, was it yesterday, last night, is that there's not been a final decision, and that will be this week probably. But it does sound as if he's going to go to Barcelona. There had been some speculation he might go to Barcelona and be loaned out. I think Valencia were mentioned as a possible destination. The reporting more recently seems to be that he would be going to Barcelona to play. Either way, it looks like he is sort of unlikely to be an option for Arsenal. And understandably so. I mean, I think we talked on here about, is he going to want to come and be sort of second fiddle to David Raya after a season of playing all year in La Liga?
What about this? I just found something else.
Go on.
From a journalist called Kike Iglesias.
Oh, yeah.
Son of Julio.
Of course, he was a pop star.
He says, under no circumstances is he going to play for Barcelona. I'm staking my credibility. I'm telling you from a top source, he is going to sign for a Premier League team. Initially, they say Newcastle. But the matter will be solved soon. Whether he's not going to play at Barcelona, I'm putting my hand in the fire. What is going on with all the fucking chopping
Spanish
hands
guys
off?
and hands? There's going to be a serious problem in Spain.
He will not play for Barcelona, or I will put my hand in a shark's anus, and you can have my credibility on that.
To be fair, if I had to put my hand in one end of a shark, that would be the one I would choose.
Right. Probably less chompy.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. They don't show everything on David Attenborough. Maybe there's things we don't see. But
the mysteries of the deep.
Yeah, exactly. With so much about the ocean, we don't know. I've heard Newcastle mention Aston Villa as well. I think have been interested, and Arsenal.
Yeah,
and Arsenal. I mean, to be fair to old Iñaki, it seems they did pick a decent player here a year ago when he'd just broken in at Espanyol. I think he'd played about a dozen games in the second division of Spanish football. And Arsenal looked at him and thought, oh, yeah, we'll have him.
We'll have
obviously, yeah, Espanyol, I think, knew what they had and said, no, we want the release clause, which was an absurd amount of money at the time for that player. But he's had a brilliant season and clearly is wanted by a load of clubs. And I think I'd be quite surprised. So it seemed like I was really choosing my word carefully, but I was also sort of half
choking
at that point in time. Yeah.
So, stop eating figs during the podcast, please.
Exactly. Sorry. I have to be quite surprised if we got him from this point. Would you? I mean, it feels like he's got, I don't want to say better options, but more appropriate options for his career.
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, I don't know how you would sell a guy who's broken through, been on the radar of Barcelona and, you know, other clubs who want him to be.
Been looking at him.
Yeah, they're saying, come and play week after week. You know, you're going to be our number one for, you know, hopefully, assuming things go well, you have the opportunity to be our number one goalkeeper for years. Whereas if you're Arsenal, you're saying, well, come and play some cup games and maybe you could be number one day. And maybe the thing from an Arsenal perspective is like, we have a history of churn at goalkeeper in recent years.
Yeah.
One day we love this guy and the next day we're looking at somebody new. We fancy a bit of something else.
But maybe that's a worry as well. Like maybe Joan Garcia thinks,
a
couple of years down the line, there'll be another 30 million Spaniards, you know, hanging out. We'll have to see him off. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see it happening.
I don't see it happening from here.
Where does that leave us then in the before we go into the break? Where does that leave us in the hunt for another goalkeeper? We did have a question here about it. See if I can find it. I'm sure it was. It was from NY Gooner on the Discord. He said, "Let's talk goalkeepers. Who do you think Arsenal should go for instead?" He said last week on Arsenal Vision, Elliot and Clive did the director of football thing. They mentioned getting Kepa as a backup. He reportedly only has a £5 million release clause. I thought that was intriguing. What are your thoughts? You know, it is a pressing issue this summer, isn't it? Because we do need a second goalkeeper. I think the young lads are promising, but probably not ready. We do have Carl Hayne, who is coming back from his loan at Rayo Vallecano, I think. But whether or not he wants to sort of play second fiddle, we're not sure. So it is an issue that Arsenal have to solve, but probably one you'd like them to solve for a little less money than 30 million.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble with Kepa, like, that's not a bad idea. He's had a good season at Bournemouth. But keepers want to play. That's the thing. It's not like being a striker or a fullback or a winger where it's like, even if I'm not in the starting 11, I might get 20, 25 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and I can play my way into the starting 11 with performances and training. You know.
Yeah. Or outfielders get injured much more than goalkeepers, for example.
Yeah. Like
if you're a second choice goalie, the likelihood is you're missing pretty much every Premier League game. That is the likelihood. Of course, you can get situations like Alisson get a big injury at Liverpool, but it's relatively rare. And I just don't see Kepa wanting to come and do that at this point in his career.
No.
He's still only
30.
30, right? Yeah, so he's probably got 4 or 5 years left as a top keeper. Who should we go for? It's a really difficult profile to fill. Really difficult.
Liverpool have brought in the Georgian lad.
I know.
Whose name...
What are you saying? Get Alisson in as number 2.
Well, I mean, they're going to have 2 very good goalkeepers there. And they've actually have had 2 very good goalkeepers. Caoimhín Kelleher is on the move as well. This summer he's going to Brentford.
Good goal.
He obviously is at a point in his career where he should be playing first team football. But it is an interesting one to consider when Liverpool have the Georgian lad, whose name I can't remember.
Mamardashvili.
Yes.
I can say that one. Just the PSG guys.
I was thinking Marmalade in my head, but I couldn't quite remember. So
yeah, Mamardashvili, I mean, they did that deal last summer, and I guess the view is that he's sort of a long-term replacement for Alisson, but as far as we understand it, Alisson's going to be there next year. I mean, I suppose in that case, Mamardashvili's playing the long game, isn't he? He's thinking...
Yeah.
I suppose a bit like Aaron Ramsdale did when he signed for Arsenal. It's that thing of like, or David Raya when he signed for Arsenal. I might not be the number one on day one, but I will be.
Little did you know.
Sooner or later. So, yeah, but I'm not sure about us doing that kind of 2 number ones thing. I don't love that as an idea.
Me either. I think you need somebody who can obviously give you backup and competition for David Raya, but I think you're going to be in a situation where he is the number one, and whoever's there is the clear number 2. But quite how they solve that problem, I'm not sure.
I mean, Mikel kind of spoke about this, actually. I'm just going to have a look at these quotes, because he spoke about construction of a squad the other day. Did you see this quote about 5 fullbacks? So he said, it's about the optimal size of the squad, but then within that squad, everybody has to accept a role. I mean, to have 22 players, but with 5 fullbacks that they all feel they are tier 1, you have a big problem. So it's probably about having the optimal size with the optimal role execution of each member of the team. That's the dream. And I do think that's why it's interesting, that, isn't it? Because sometimes managers say, I want 22 players who could all play. You know what I mean? And then I think sometimes they get that, and then they're like, oh, that's actually quite difficult.
Yeah, well, that's what Pep was saying there a couple of weeks ago.
We don't remember Cedric fondly, right? But there's something useful about having a guy who knows he's third choice. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's quite an easy, as a manager, it's kind of easy to maintain that kind of hierarchy.
Yeah, but I think as fans, we look at that and think, well, why do we have a Cedric in the squad and not somebody a bit better? Talk of always raising the level, raising the floor of the squad, if not necessarily the ceiling. And that's sort of a player who everybody looks at and goes, well, unless there's an emergency, we shouldn't be playing him.
Yeah.
Is viewed more or less as kind of a waste of resources.
I do see that. I do see that. And I'm just saying it's an interesting point Arteta makes about sometimes you have to have people in the squad who are the tier below,
Yeah.
And how you do that is like, do you do it with academy players? Do you do it with the likes of your Cedrics, who are like older players, approaching the end of their career, who are sort of, accept their position? I don't know. But like, I think goalkeeper is one of those areas where you have to have that hierarchy. And so finding a player who's like good enough to play, but not problematic, it's tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a problem for them to solve this summer for Iñaki Caña and Mikel Arteta and Andrea Berta.
And I think a lot of those people will probably be, particularly your Andrea Bertas of this world, and the money men at Arsenal will probably be quite relieved they're not solving it with Joan Garcia. You know what I mean? Like, from a technical point of view, he was the recommendation, and obviously they wanted to honour that. But financially, it's not ideal. There surely is a more affordable alternative.
Yeah, I mean, if your technical recommendation is, a player who could play for pretty much any club, you're going to face serious competition, aren't you? So
yeah.
All right. Shall we take a break?
Let's take a break.
We will be back with your questions. Some of them are about Striker. We don't have any questions about Figs. Don't worry. We'll be back with all of that and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Blue Sky at gunnerblog.bsky.social and at arseblog.com. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. James, I will give you the honour of asking the first question this week.
Oh, that's very kind.
So I just get my
Let's
figs
do
ready.
some number 9 stuff, shall we?
Yes, okay.
We've beaten around this bush long enough. Okay. Oh no, I can't do that question. The question was from John Boy. I keep seeing the flip-flop between Gyökeres and Sesko reported in the media, with deals being in various states of being done. Do you think we are seriously looking at buying both? But I think I've addressed that in part 1.
But if Stan Kroenke gave a single...
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck.
He gave one
tiny little fucking figgity fucking fig.
Okay, here's a question about another striker who has been linked with Arsenal, from Henry Mooland, who says, "Morning, guys. What do you make of Cunha heading to Man United, particularly in the context of strikers we're interested in? He's a good player, but if his temperament and discipline are anything to go by, I'm not sure he's an Arteta player." What do you think?
I mean, I do think he's a good player, for sure. Somebody who we were linked with quite strongly back in January, right? When we were all desperate for any kind of signing.
Yeah, and we looked at him years ago when he came to Wolves from Atletico around that time.
Yeah, I think he is a good player. Are there some issues with temperament? I'm not sure. He's had a few little issues, hasn't he, this season at Wolves, some suspensions and everything else. I think he makes Manchester United better because, well, Højlund, Xerxes, and the return of Anthony.
Is he a number 9?
I don't think he is a number 9, no.
He's kind of a 9.5.
Yeah. He doesn't strike me as like, if you're talking about Sesko and Gyökeres as like the archetypal number 9 type player, he's definitely not that. But somebody who could play behind there a bit.
Even at Wolves, he played off the left, he played off the right, he played as a number 10. He wasn't often, don't think, playing as a kind of out-and-out striker.
Yeah. I mean, my question would be, how many staff of Manchester United laid off to sign this guy? And does this mean that they've had to close their soup kitchen?
Yeah, good point. Because it's fair or whack, isn't it? It's like 60 million quid or something. But I suppose once they cash in for Bruno Fernandes,
I mean, yeah, that could be a thing, and I think he might be more a replacement for him than sort of one of their strikers or forwards. I think it is one of those early season, early summer transfer moves. You know, a decent player going to a club you don't like. You're sort of like, oh, I don't really like this. You know, because we haven't done anything yet either to offset.
Oh, I don't mind, honestly.
No, I'm not. I mean, I'm not that hung up on it, but it is one of those where you're sort of like, I wish they'd just buy like another big bunch of crap like they have been doing for the last little while. Whereas I do think he is a good player and he will improve them.
I think he will improve them. I'm not convinced he's what they need. That's my opinion. I just don't necessarily. I think they need more of an out-and-out striker, and obviously they didn't get Delap, who's gone to Chelsea.
That's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I sort of feel as a player. I mean, it's a step up from Wolves, don't get me wrong. And I'm sure financially it's a big step up too.
I mean, careful now. Based on what we've seen from Manchester United this season. Wolves finished ahead of Manchester United this season. So
well, exactly. That's sort of where I'm going with it.
He's taking a step down.
It's a step down. You're right. Actually, United did finish ahead of Wolves on goal difference.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, that final day victory. That probably clinched the Cunha signing for them. You know what I mean? That precious 15th place.
Sideways step then,
Yeah, so it's a sideways move, exactly. And Cunha. Yeah, I don't think it's going to move the needle for them. That's my prediction. Maybe he'll score 40 goals next season, and I'll be wrong. But it's not a signing that has me worried that they might be back.
Okay.
Wolves had him this year, and they finished 16th. So we'll see, won't we?
All right. Well, look, we have to address the actual striker stuff that's going on.
Okay.
Helen Tarula says Berta and Arteta can't decide between Sesko and Gyökeres. That's because measly skinflint Stan fucking Kroenke won't sign both of them. Yeah. But he said they're both available at what the club considers a reasonable price. They decide to leave the decision to Andrew and James of the Arsecast Extra. Who do you pick and why? And this, I guess, comes off the back of reporting. I have to get this. Wording correct.
Well, yes.
From
please. Respect the craft.
Transfer guru Fabrizio Romano. He says Arsenal have started moving initial concrete talks.
And does that mean that they are moving talks? Like they're sort of very emotive?
I don't know if they're moving talks or if they've shifted talks from one location to the other. Whether are they talking about concrete?
They are initial concrete.
Moving initial concrete talks. So
I mean, look, we've all done it. I there, but for the grace of God, I don't mean to take the mickey. I've been in that position where you're like, right, how do I
say this? Yes.
Yeah. So they're leaving it up to us, are they?
They're leaving it up to us. They're saying you make the decision. Who are you going to bring in over Big Vic and Sesko? And it does seem, based on what Fabrizio Romano is saying, that, to his understanding at least, the moving initial concrete talks are a sign that we've made a decision. But, that's one perspective, I guess. There might be other stuff going on in the background that he's not aware of, and Arsenal, could be keeping their options open for all we know.
Yeah, and I to be fair to Fabrizio, like I think maybe not in his tweets, but like in his wider coverage around it, he has sort of said, "Oh, there is still interest in Gyokeres and things like that." And
Sky, by the way, Sky Germany reported a secret meeting between Andrea Berta and RB Leipzig, whoever his equivalent is there.
So what I would say is, of course there are talks. Like, what are we paying Andrea Berta to do if there aren't talks? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's his job. And
that's the job.
That's his job. And from the little I have gathered about Andrea Berta since he arrived, like, he is a man who likes to have all the information at his disposal. Like, why meet one agent when he could meet 5? Why speak to one club when he could speak to 2? He wants to know the landscape and the layout of the market very well. And I think that's good. That's exactly what you want and need in a sporting director, someone who knows all the options and permutations. So, yeah, of course there are talks. And I'm sure there are talks with Sporting or Gyökeres. And I think it would be remiss if there weren't, really. In terms of what I would do, I have flip-flopped on this over the last few months.
I have too a bit, but I know where I sort of stand on it now.
Okay. I think I'm Team Sesko, if I have to pick a side.
Me too.
Oh no, that's not good for the podcast. One of us has to be one team and one has to be the other. Then we can have a debate.
Well, I can tell you why I think I would go with Sesko.
You tell me.
Like, on the one hand,
imagine I'm Andrea Berta and Mikel Arteta, and you're telling me, explaining your decision.
I'm sort of saying that, look, he's very raw. There are elements of his game that need improving, but he is young, still pretty young. I think he's only, is he 21?
He's 21 and also soon to be 22, I think.
Yeah, but until he turns...
such time as.
Yeah.
He's 22, guys.
He's 22.
He went 3 days ago.
Now he's 22 until he turns 23, but we don't have to worry about that for a while.
A long time.
So I think, you can look at him and you can say there are aspects of his game that need to be improved and can develop. But the fact that he has been scoring at a
respectable rate.
A respectable rate in a good league, right? And I'm not saying the Portuguese league isn't a good league, but at an early age to be putting up those numbers suggests to me that there is more to come down the line. And I feel like I'm not comparing Sesko to Alexander Isak, right? But what I'm saying is we're at a point maybe with this guy where we were with Isak a few years ago. We didn't pull the trigger. Newcastle came along, paid the fee, got the player. He's a great player now, and he's a player that we would all want. And I feel like if we have, and this is going to annoy people, I know, but if we have already Kai Havertz, then it means the risk, such as it is with someone like Sesko, is offset a little bit. If it takes him a little bit of time to settle in, to get used to the Premier League, to develop to the level that you exactly want him to be, Kai Havertz is still a very good option for Arsenal. He's a good player who scores goals. Do we need more? Absolutely we do. That's why we're talking about strikers. But I think having Havertz allows you to sort of ease Sesko into Premier League action, and the upside or potential upside for Sesko is the fact that he's got years and years and years ahead of him. And I kind of feel like that's where I am with him. I could be completely wrong, and maybe it's insane to overlook a guy who has scored like 100 goals in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, if I was playing Big Vic's advocate,
yeah,
I would say to you, but Andrew, what about, we need to win now. This is the window.
But we also need to win in the future too. So, yeah, I get it. I completely get it. And I can see both sides of this one. I just feel it would just annoy me if we didn't go for Sesko and then all of a sudden he goes to Liverpool or he goes to fucking Aston Villa or somewhere, and then you're going, why didn't we buy him when we had the chance to buy him?
The Isak principle, basically.
The Isak principle, yeah. It was once bitten, twice shy, fool me once, etc., kind of thing.
I think, because I don't know, but I think we might be in the minority in being Team Sesko. I don't know, but I'm just having a look at The Athletic did a thing where they surveyed subscribers at the end of the season, and I want to see what people voted for. They asked a question about the striker. So this was at the end of the season. Which striker would you most like Arsenal to sign if Alexander Isak is not an option? Bloody hell, it's close. There were 6,000 responses. 43% of people went Gyökeres. 40% went Sesko. 9% went Ollie Watkins. And 7% went other.
Other?
Yeah.
Right.
Just like someone who's not on that list.
I get it. I thought he was just a Brazilian I hadn't heard of.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, I if the numbers for the Ollie Watkins deal were a lot less, and it meant you could do a really exciting wide forward, for example, I might be in that 9%. I might be that niche and crazy. But the question that we were asked was specifically Gyokeres versus Sesko.
Who is the exciting wide option
of wingers?
Yeah, that's it. Is it Nico Williams? I mean, look, exciting player, but when you look at the numbers,
yeah.
But maybe that's the same kind of vibe where you're going, okay, we've got a guy, he's got some years under his belt, and now is the time where he starts to really deliver and produce goals and assists at a serious level, you know?
Yeah. I mean, is it Rodrigo or something like that? Or is it... I'm highly dubious about that one. But
I'm not even that high on Rodrigo, I have to say.
Yeah. A Leao or something, you know, like, I don't know, something big and crazy. I'm not saying I expect that to happen, but it as a kind of hypothetical.
But do you think it is this binary, by the way? Do you think it is an either-or situation that Arteta and Andrea Berta are going to have to just go, right, it's that guy, this is our guy, let's get the deal done? Because as you've pointed out previously as well, there are other clubs across Europe looking for centre forwards right now. Yeah. And so there is an element of pressure, I guess. Make your mind up and get it done, because if you don't, somebody else will, or you're going to have to, you know, compromise yourself a bit later in the window because the options are not where they were.
Yeah, I mean, I think that pressure is alleviated a touch, only in that Liverpool doing Verts, I have read that might mean they don't do a sort of conventional number 9 because the size of the outlay on that player. Mm-hmm. Chelsea have obviously done Delap. I don't think that prohibits them signing another striker, and there's some talk that Jackson could leave. So, you know, but it just sort of reduces that slightly. United have obviously signed Cunha. So that is a factor, maybe not quite as big a factor as I feared it might be. I think it pretty much is between those two at this point in time. I'm always sort of reticent to say that because things could change. But that's certainly been my understanding, that, like, you know, Isak was the dream and these two were the next in line. And Sesko is the one who has been in line for the longest. I mean, he is the guy that Arsenal have followed and tracked and you know, been interested in over a protracted period. Gyökeres is a bit more of a summer fling. But a lot of people think that's what we need, you know, and I understand that. I'm not saying at all that those people are wrong. And frankly, none of us know how either of these players will fare in the Premier League. And they both are a bit of a gamble, right? I mean, any signing is, but I think there are enough question marks over these two for neither to be a sure thing. I just feel that, as I said last week, I kind of feel like Sesko is the smarter, more strategic signing. Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't Isak have been a gamble back in the day? I know that the talent was there, but he had the injury record at Real Sociedad. The money was...
He didn't have the goal record either. That's the thing. Yeah. I think he scored something like 4 goals at that point in time in January. So, yeah. If you want a known quantity, you buy Ollie Watkins. If you want a known Premier League quantity, you buy Ollie Watkins, in my opinion. But you know, part of the point of transfers is that they are speculative and they are investments, and they enable you to, you know, grow your equity effectively by buying a player who becomes better. And I think Sesko presents your best opportunity of doing that.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because I think this is an interesting aspect of all this. Since he arrived at the club, Mikel Arteta has not really spent, and I know it's not just him, right? But, you know, as the manager, as the head coach, the spending under him has not really prioritized the forward positions. In part because he inherited, like, brilliant Bukayo Saka, and he had Gabriel Martinelli. He did buy Gabriel Jesus. Obviously, he's bought Kai Havertz, and it sort of worked out, but I don't think, you know, the Kai Havertz signing was necessarily designed for him to play centre forward. But that's the way it's worked out, and that's the way football can go. Do you think there is either an onus on or a bit of pressure on Mikel Arteta to demonstrate that, along with, you know, his staff and the technical staff, the recruitment staff, the sporting director, all of these people who are part of the decisions that get made, is there some onus on him to do something that isn't Ollie Watkins, for want of a better way of putting it, right? Listen, I'm not being in any way disparaging to Ollie Watkins, who I think is a really good player, who would unquestionably, in my mind, come in and score goals for Arsenal in the very short term. Short to medium term would be a good signing and would score goals, right? But in the summer window, with, far more spent on defenders and midfielders and almost even on goalkeepers, that this is a signing that needs to demonstrate an ability to spot talent, not for just now, but for the future, like a sort of a big signing where in time people go, wow, that was just a fucking great deal. Well done. It wasn't the safe option, if you like.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of scrutiny on this, and there's a lot of pressure on it. And it's the kind of, I don't want to say it's defining, but if Arsenal make this choice and they get it wrong, and what will be getting it wrong, I guess that will be the other bloke going somewhere else and doing much better. That is going to have consequences in terms of perception for Mikel Arteta. I think certainly for Andrea Berta, because he's come into the club this summer. There's no way that in that in his own recruitment process, in the sort of interview process, this position, this subject was not discussed, because everybody and their dog knew it was going to be the focus really of the summer transfer window. So, I don't think the club will thank me for saying it, but for Berta, I think he could live or die by this deal. I think it will determine enormously how he's perceived publicly, whether or not Arsenal get it right. And I don't mean when they make the signing and what the reaction to that is on Twitter or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the fullness of time, over the next 2 or 3 years, it's a huge call. And it might be the difference between Arsenal winning things and not.
Yeah. It's a huge one, yeah.
So I understand. I understand everyone saying, well, get on with it. Make a bloody decision. But
sign them both.
Yeah, sign them both. Hedge your bets, right? But equally, I can understand there being a process and a debate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're not sure as a fan base, right? Look at those survey results. It's pretty much an even split. But I do, this was a few weeks ago, this survey, and maybe I'm wrong. And maybe if it was Gyökeres who was getting more reporting at this time, there'd be more talk about, I'm not sure about this. But it does feel at the moment that the kind of prevailing attitude does seem to be, well, we need a here and now signing. I was really struck by that thing that I think it maybe Clive or Tim said it. One of the clever ones said it at the live podcast. And they were like, there's a lot of focus on Arsenal need a 30 goal forward. But in reality, they probably need about 15 goals. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I'm not saying don't sign a 30-goal striker. I'm just saying I'm not even sure that these players, either of them, have to be a 30-goal striker next season for us to achieve our goals.
No, I agree. That's why I think you, for me anyway, if you're looking longer term and you're thinking, can Sesko come in and score 15 goals? Yeah. And maybe the year after he can score 20 and then...
And not just that. Can Sesko score 15? But can we get a replacement for Raheem Sterling who contributes 10 goals? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can Martin Odegaard actually find his shooting boots again? Can we get more out of Gabriel Martinelli or Leandro Trossard? I think we can get there. And I think we can get there while still sort of making signings that represent a good investment.
Yeah.
Equally, I'm not saying Gyökeres couldn't come in and be brilliant. Like, if Gyökeres can do in England what he did in Portugal, then it's a no-brainer. But
I don't know that he can, and that's not to be dismissive of him.
Yeah.
I don't know that any player is going to come in and score 50 goals in a league season.
Well, that's what I say if. I mean, even if he could get 30, you know what I mean? Like, that would be, as I say, probably a no-brainer. But I don't think we know that he can do that. I mean, I think he scored something like 18 penalties last season. So we do have to sort of try and analyse the numbers a little bit. And I saw some interesting data in the week around like who his goals came against. I don't know if you saw that.
No.
There's a thread on Blue Sky by a guy, I want to say his name is Adam, but let me see if I can find it. Adam Ray Vogue. And he did a breakdown of like who Gyökeres' goals came against in Portugal. That was quite interesting. And the rate. So like against Benfica, Porto and Braga, he averaged 0.2 goals per game. But against teams from 10th through to 18th in the Portuguese league, he averaged 1.2 goals per game.
So you're saying flat track bully, basically.
That's what the numbers say.
Right.
You know.
No, I get it. And I understand those concerns in a big way. I really do. Not just that, but sort of the level of the Portuguese league.
Yeah.
You know, there's some brilliant players have come out of Portugal. And there are some good Portuguese teams as well. But I just think generally speaking, it's sort of like, remember when Alexandre Lacazette couldn't score for Arsenal in his final season and then went to France and scored 30 goals the next season and looked like, you know, an absolute goal machine. I think it's that kind of thing. You do have to take into context the level of the league. So, yeah.
But, you know, I think even you and I, like, we might say, oh, we're sort of, you know, leaning towards Sesko. But as I say, I flip-flopped on it. I could debate it endlessly. So I don't feel angry at Arsenal that they might have a similar debate going on.
I would just say, before we close this off and do another couple of questions to finish us off, I would just say that, you know, it's one thing for us as fans to have those debates. I think internally they are paid the money and have the expertise and everything else to be able to sort of assess the pros and cons of each transfer much more rigorously and quickly, perhaps, than we did. It might be a financial aspect. There might be financial aspects at play. You know, who's looking for what? How much do Leipzig want? How much do Sporting want?
How does that impact what else you can do? All these things.
Yeah, what do we value those players at internally versus what those guys want? You know.
I suspect if there was no money involved, they know who they want, but they probably have to weigh the cost of each deal as quite a significant factor in the decision.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. What about this then? We had a couple of questions around this sort of angle. Sesk Flabregas. He's a really fat Sesk, I believe. He says, why do you think the club aren't looking at creative midfielders? It's a big and obvious problem. We haven't tried to address it for some windows now. And there was another one. It was basically, from Master Johnbury. That's a completely different question. It was basically about Martin Odegaard. My apologies to whoever asked that question. It was about Martin Odegaard and, you know, him being basically the only option for that creative midfield role. And is that not something we should be addressing?
Yeah, I mean, I would like it.
It comes. Paul Stevens was the other one. He's Gunnar Stifler.bsky.social, and he says, surely last season showed our biggest point of failure was no backup or alternative to Martin Odegaard. So isn't acquiring a player to fulfill that role as important? Well, he says more important than a striker this summer. But
I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that either. But.
I think a striker is more important. I think, and I might think a wide player is more important, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we know, it doesn't seem to be figuring prominently in the reporting, does it? A chase for a creative midfield player. We've seen bits and pieces, but it doesn't seem to be especially high on the agenda. Surely Ethan Ranieri is kind of the biggest part of this conversation, and what the club envision for him next season. Because, Mikel Arteta has alluded to the idea that they do see that kind of creative attacking midfield role as his real position, as well as he did sort of fleetingly on the flanks. I think that's where they see him long term. So do you have to give him that chance effectively to be that player, especially when you're looking to get him to sign a new contract? So I think, I suspect that he may be the reason. If we don't sign a creative midfield player, he may be the reason why.
Okay. I'm going to go again, if you don't mind, because I've got a couple of questions here.
Okay.
One from Reubs on the Discord. He said, just curious what you think of the news that Forest are potentially signing 3 Brazilian players from Botafogo. While Forest have signed a few Brazilians pre-Edu, it always seemed odd to me that given Edu's connections, we never really utilised the South American market, especially for young players. And Tanner Osman.bsky.social, more or less the same question. Edu never really tapped into the Brazil market, signing under-the-radar gems for a low price. By the way, I did enjoy Fabrizio Romano's "It's over between Arsenal and Marquinhos." Marquinhos has gone and signed for someone. Anyway, it's over, so we shouldn't shed any tears. He goes on to say, is there any sense that Berta will use his knowledge of the Spanish league to pick up some bargains, but really more about Edu and Brazilian players and the fact we didn't really sign any apart from Marquinhos, who, with all due respect, wasn't really the sort of hidden gem we were all hoping for?
Yeah, that's got Edu's fingerprints all over it, I would imagine. It's not the first time either that Forest have brought in good young Brazilian players. They did that before Edu as well.
They did. Danilo was a player we were linked with, and they've obviously brought in Murillo.
Yeah, with some success.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Kia Drabchin has done quite a lot of business with Forest, and he's obviously got a lot of links in Brazil. So it's no great surprise that they should sort of go that route. In terms of it happening at Arsenal, I'm just trying to think. Marquinhos, farewell Marquinhos. We barely knew thee, right?
We stole him from, was it Wolves who were looking to sign him, actually?
Probably.
I think it was. And then we signed him and then loaned him out, didn't we?
Yeah.
We'll
always have that Europa League game where he scored. Do you remember?
Yeah, and then he cried. That was a nice moment. That was a lovely little moment, But yeah, we signed him and then loaned him to Norwich, then loaned him to Nantes. But yeah.
I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised we've been able to sell him. So I think he was at a point in his loan. What club is he with? Is it? It's not Botafogo, is it?
No, he was with Fluminense. And then it turns out he's joined Cruzeiro.
Yeah.
On loan, but apparently that's going to become official permanent transfer.
Yeah, so basically he was on loan there, and there was some talk that they stopped playing him, I think, because there was some odd thing where if he Cruzeiro. Oh, he was at Fluminense. I'm getting confused, yeah. Okay, look.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. He's gone. And I'm sort of relatively pleasantly surprised that we found a buyer, because he's not had a great time of it on his various loan spells.
No.
He's had a few injuries. He struggled to get regular football. do I feel like we'd sort of missed the boat on exploiting the Brazilian market? Maybe. I mean, we looked at other Brazilians. We looked at the guy, Vitor Reis, who joined Manchester United. Joined Manchester City, rather. I don't have... Do I think Berta's going to look at the Spanish market? I mean, to be fair, I think Mikel Arteta's quite across the Spanish market anyway at sort of first-team level, when you look at some of the signings we've made.
Certainly across the Real Sociedad.
Yeah. He only watches their games, I think.
It'd be like us going to manage in Spain and just buying Arsenal players because we like Arsenal.
Yeah.
Because that's his boyhood club, isn't it?
I mean, I also think the Portuguese market, they tried the Fabio Vieira thing. That didn't really work out. Interested to see what happens with him this summer.
Sell him to Wolves.
Probably. It's his destiny. So, and then he goes to PSG and wins the Champions League, I imagine, is how this all plans out. I don't have a strong feeling on this, Andrew. Do you? I think it's so hard to have competitive advantage.
Not now. Especially, yeah. I mean, it would have been nice to sort of bring
Everyone likes having some Brazilians,
Yeah, bring in a couple of young players maybe who could have done it, but look, I have
got something to say on that. I do think that at Arsenal there has been a bit of a shift, shall we say. I think they could invest more in sort of those development prospects. So I'm talking about like 18, 19-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like of late there's been a lot of emphasis on the first team, and understandably, and a kind of win now approach. But as you said earlier, we also have to win tomorrow. And I think that a smart club maybe puts a little bit more emphasis on recruiting talent, the talent of tomorrow, shall we say.
Sure. So apologies for dominating the questions, but there was one which I think is in the ballpark here. It comes from tomlangford.bsky.social. He says, maybe one for James, but any idea what's happened to our interest in Naipan, Sfera Naipan? Seems like it was quite close in January, and we still seem to have a bit of a hole in midfield. And I think I've seen stories that he's going to join Aston Villa, is it?
Yeah, I don't think that's confirmed yet, but that seemed to be the direction that it was going. That's a great example. Like, I think if Arsenal had really aggressively pursued that player, they probably could have got him. And the same's probably true of Reis in terms of the timeline. Like, if they'd gone for him really hard before January actually started, I think they probably would have got that sewn up.
What does when you say that? What exactly does that mean? Does that mean actually sort of putting a deal in place, or is it about wooing the player, convincing the player? Should you have to convince an 18-year-old to come and join Arsenal? An Arsenal team that I know this season has been difficult and challenging, but at the same time, an Arsenal team whose reputation has been really enhanced over the last couple of years. So if you're like an 18-year-old and you're going, ooh, Arsenal want me to come and play with Saka and Rice and Odegaard and these guys, William Saliba and Gabriel, etc., that seems like an easy sell. So is it down to the club to make players really want to come, or is it about sort of doing the dirty deal with the other club and just putting the money down, etc.?
Well, let me answer that question with a question, which is, why might a young player choose to join Aston Villa if Arsenal have also made an offer?
Because they have been maybe given a clearer pathway to first team football or involvement with the first team?
Yeah, basically. And I think that is the difficulty. It's like, maybe that's just not something Arsenal can offer because they're competing at such an elite level. I mean, I would say, Villa were in the Champions League this year and got through to the knockouts and did pretty well. PSG, same as us. But I think if that is the way it goes with Naipan, and I think if he was going to join Arsenal, it probably would have happened by now. I think it's probably on that sort of pitch to the player, development plan, what you're able to sort of lay out for them, to persuade them that this is the right place for them to come. I think that's the key. And I think probably like that requires buy-in from the manager. You know, I think if you think about the Arsene Wenger era, like Arsene Wenger on a case like Naipan, he would have been in Norway with the mum and dad. Do you know what I mean? Like he had that level of involvement and investment in players who probably weren't going to be at their best for like 5-6 years. And I think that Mikel Arteta, for better and worse, is much more focused on the here and now. And I think that the challenge is to sort of like, I think as a young player, you want to feel like the manager has that degree of passion and involvement, even for a deal that might not immediately benefit him.
Yeah, it's like when Manchester United sent Gary Neville to represent them when trying to sign Aaron Ramsey, and we had Arsene Wenger. And if people don't remember, Manchester United announced Aaron Ramsey that they had.
That's an agreement with Cardiff. For sure,
they said, we have come to an agreement with Cardiff over the transfer of Aaron Ramsey, who was at that point 17 years of age. And they sent Gary Neville to sort of escort him around and show him Manchester and what have you. But obviously the personal touch from the big man is what made a difference, you know? So.
And, you know, you've got to remember January was when all this Naipan stuff was going on. We had no Edu, no sporting director at the time. We had Jason Ato as interim. You know, Mikel very invested in the first team, practically in terms of the games coming thick and fast, but also transfer-wise, wanting a centre forward above all other things. Certainly above an 18-year-old midfielder from Norway. And I'm just not sure Arsenal had everything lined up to necessarily make that player the best possible pitch.
I know what you mean.
And so, yeah, but it's tough, right? Because I equally, I feel a lot of fans will say, well, yeah, we don't care about an iPad. We want players who can play now. But that's what I mean. Like,
why not both?
Why not both? Yeah.
Why not both? You know?
Well, yeah. And I think if I had to simplify, I'd say a deal like a Naipan deal is sort of a bit more of a club deal, a sporting director deal than a manager deal.
Sure.
Because the sporting director is the guy who has to think about 5 years' time and future-proof and plan, whereas the manager, in theory, he's all about the day-to-day, the games, what's immediate. Arsene wasn't like that because he was sort of a sporting director in his nature, in the way that he viewed recruitment and things like that. So maybe in time, that is a role that Berta will fill. And I think, to give him his due, it seems that Atletico, he did do a lot of deals like that. You know, he did bring in young players who sometimes Simeone used and sometimes he didn't, but they were sort of investments on the part of the club. And I think ultimately for Arsenal to really be efficient in the market, that's probably something that has to start happening. But whether it's going to happen in Berta's first few months in the job when he's desperately trying to sign a number 9, I don't know.
Well, look, there's a long summer ahead.
Yeah.
A long summer ahead. And I really do actually agree with you a little bit on some of those players, those younger profile players who can come in and listen, you might have a hit rate of 1 in 3, 1 in 4, perhaps, you know, but if the investments aren't too great and you maintain some value in those players, you can always get your money back at least, you know?
Yeah. I mean, Chelsea have done a ton of it, haven't they? But, and other clubs who do it, they benefit from things like a multi-club model, you know, where they can stick a player at Girona or wherever it might be. We don't have that. But so that inhibits us a little bit. But it is an area, like I'd love to see us make the signings we all expect and want in this window. But I'd also love it if there were like two 10 million 19-year-old wildcards,
Sure.
who might be great or at worst probably retain their value. And they go out. We might not even see them. They might go out on loan for the next year. But it's just that thing of sort of looking at the future and thinking this guy could be something. Yeah.
Well, let's see what they have in store. We better leave it there, though, because we've been going quite a while. We do need to get this podcast. It's quite a long one, considering there's not much going on, but plenty to talk about. And thank you to everybody for your questions, as always. Sorry we couldn't get to more of them, but there's been plenty to discuss. We will have another Arsecast Extra for you next week, of course, next Monday or Sunday. We'll figure that out. I've got to talk to James about that because there's holidays afoot, so it might be quiet for a little bit, but we will be around next week. As ever, thank you so much for listening and for being with us, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers.
Bye-bye.